Jar City, written by Arnaldur Indridason, read by Saul Reichlin. The moral right of the author has been asserted. It's all one great big bloody mire. Inspector Erlendur Svensson. Reykjavik, 2001. Chapter 1. The words were written in pencil on a piece of paper placed on top of the body. 3 words incomprehensible to Erlendur. It was the body of a man of about 70. He was lying on the floor on his right side against the sofa in a small sitting room, wearing a blue shirt and fawn corduroy trousers. He wore slippers on his feet. His hair was starting to thin, almost completely grey. It was stained with blood from a large wound on his head. On the floor, not far from the body, was a big glass ashtray with sharp corners. It, too, was covered in blood. The coffee table had been overturned. This was a basement flat in a 2-story house in Norðurmýri. It stood in a small garden enclosed on 3 sides by a stone wall. The trees had shed their leaves, which carpeted the garden and covered the ground, and the knotty branches stretched up towards the darkness of the sky. Along a gravel drive which led to the garage, Reykjavik CID were arriving at the scene. The district medical officer was expected. He would sign the death certificate. The body had been reported found about 15 minutes earlier. Erlendur, detective inspector with the Reykjavik police, was one of the first on the scene. He expected his colleague, Sigurdur Óli, any minute. The October dust spread over the city, and the rain slapped around in the autumn wind. Someone had switched on a lamp which stood on a table in the sitting room and cast a gloomy light on the surroundings. In other respects, nothing at the scene had been touched. The forensics team were setting up powerful fluorescent lights on a tripod to illuminate the flat. Erlendur noticed a bookcase and a worn suite of furniture, the overturned coffee table, an old desk in one corner, a carpet on the floor, blood on the carpet. The sitting room opened into the kitchen, and another door led from it to the den, and on to a small corridor where there were 2 rooms and a toilet. The police had been notified by the upstairs neighbour. He had come home that afternoon after collecting his 2 boys from school, and it struck him as strange to see the basement door wide open. He could see inside his neighbour's flat and called out to discover whether he was in. There was no answer. He peered inside the flat and called his name again, but there was no response. They'd been living on the upper floor for several years, but did not know the old man in the basement well. The elder son, 9 years old, was not as cautious as his father, and quick as a flash he was in the neighbour's sitting room. A moment later the child came back and said there was a dead man in the flat, and he really didn't seem too perturbed by it. "You watch too many movies," the boy's father said, and cautiously made his way into the flat, where he saw his neighbour lying dead on the sitting-room floor. Erlendur knew the dead man's name. It was on the doorbell. But to avoid the risk of making an idiot of himself, he put on some thin rubber gloves and fished the man's wallet out of a jacket hanging on a peg by the front doorway, and found a payment card with a photograph on it. The man's name was Holberg, 69 years old. Dead in his home, presumed murdered. Erlendur walked around the flat and pondered the simplest questions. That was his job, investigating the obvious. Forensics handled the mysterious. He could see no signs of a break-in, neither on the windows nor the doors. On first impression, the man seemed to have let his assailant into the flat himself. The upstairs neighbours had left footprints all over the front hallway and sitting-room carpet when they came in out of the rain, and the attacker must have done the same. Unless he took off his shoes by the front door. It looked to Erlendur as if he had been in too much of a rush to have had the chance to take off his shoes. The forensic team had brought along a vacuum cleaner to collect the tiniest particles and granules from which to produce clues. They searched for fingerprints and mud.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?